Hi, so this is an intro video to a series of two other videos. This is on my 3D printable mask designs and construction based on the NanoHack concept. Now I want to start with a disclaimer. I am not a scientist, an engineer, or a medical professional. I don't know if my designs are functional or dangerous, but I'm providing them anyway in this emergency situation that we're all stuck in. This is going to be in four parts. First, I'm going to present the NanoHack concept, which was published by a company called Copper 3D. I'm just going to present it, a summary as they presented it. Then I'm going to do a takedown, quite frankly, of the NanoHack concept. I want to be very clear, nobody should be using that NanoHack design as it was published. It is non-functional and dangerous, especially if you don't really understand what it is it does and doesn't do. So I'm going to go through a quick analysis in more detail of that. Then I'm going to go through my goals for sort of a design/redesign of the mask to make it minimally functional and useful. And then I'm just going to introduce the two different mask builds and therefore the two subsequent videos that sort of go through the process of how to actually make those masks. So, all right, the NanoHack concept. This right here is the sort of Copper 3D NanoHack mask. These are the original parts. I've done some stuff on the back side, but this is the original mask. The original concept was that it was 3D printed, which this is 3D printed. It was made out of renewable and recyclable materials, specifically PLA plastic. That it's thermoformed, printed flat and thermoformed. This one I have formed to my face. And that in their original concept, it would be made out of antimicrobial materials, specifically a composite PLA with composite and copper powder that they refer to as PL active. But given the emergency situation, they released the basic 3D files for this thing, open source. And sort of the caveats in that is that you weren't going to have the antimicrobial material. You would really probably only be able to print out of PLA or other plastics, not specifically antimicrobials, because they didn't have enough stock to supply the world or anything along those lines. And that the reason why it was still sort of viable was because of this modular filter chamber. And the idea is that they printed out, came with a few parts. Actually, I should show you. It also comes specifically with this honeycomb filter. This is the third part that it prints. You print the mask, you print the cap, and then you print this honeycomb filter. And they tell you you can assemble it and you can just use this. They said, or if you want to, you could use other filter materials in there as well because it's modular. And that's sort of how they presented this thing as is. So, all right, let's move into the takedown of this concept. The original 1.0 design of this thing does not work. The included filter honeycomb is almost useless. These little holes are like 1.5 centimeters wide. They don't filter anything, okay? The seal that this thing makes on your face, even when it's, really well thermoformed, is minimal. It's almost too weak to use. The cap design on the filter, the airflow is too restrictive, and it fights against the weak seal, and it's just so fundamentally restrictive that this thing cannot actually work as exists. And lastly, their dubious material choice for filters. I mean, first of all, they seem to think that even if you printed this out of like a copper-infused composite PLA plastic, that would be enough somehow. It wouldn't. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea. And then the two materials that they suggested otherwise were non-woven polypropylene, which is the same material that surgical masks are made out of. But of course, if you had surgical masks, you would just use the surgical masks. Why would you put them inside of this thing? The other thing they suggested was cotton pads, like makeup pads, which is sort of, and they said it might be too difficult to breathe through, which it absolutely is. And they said you could cut it in half, and hopefully people understand what they mean is to cut it, sort of make it thinner, not actually just cut it in half, because if you just put half a circle in there, it's going to do nothing. But there's really no way to get it down to a thickness that it's actually breathable, especially with such a weak seal on the mask and such restrictions elsewhere in the mask. So, and more importantly, they didn't back up those material choices with any research. And you can go and find appropriate research elsewhere, and that research points you in different directions than what they suggested. They allude to it being disposable, the mask, but it takes too long to thermoform to actually use it in a disposable manner. And I'm not really sure they really meant it to be usable, disposable. I thought it might have been a language barrier issue, but it's really not. Like they sort of keep suggesting in their materials that like, it's disposable, but you know, if you use it in a disposable sense, it takes half an hour to put one of these things together. So why would you like spend half an hour, put it together, use it for 10 minutes, throw it away, and then spend another half hour before you go see another patient? Like that makes no sense in any kind of sense. Worse than that, though, is that it was being suggested for use by medical professionals. But a hard mask like this is clearly inappropriate for moving from patient to patient where you're trying to sort of isolate them from one another. There was a hospital administrator up in Boston who made a big public cry in the news media and ended up on like the Rachel Maddow show. That, you know, I heard there's a 3D printable N95 mask and everyone should be printing those things and sending them to us. And that was clearly a horrible, horrible mistake. This thing should absolutely not be used by medical professionals. There are a lot of things that medical professionals should be using with regards to like coming up with masks and before they would ever consider using something like using this thing at all, because it's practically useless and dangerous. He clearly put the cart before, ahead of the horse. It was stupid. It was just stupid, and no one should be doing that. Their claims about PLA being sort of like, renewable, recyclable material, it's like it sort of is, but it isn't. PLA is technically recyclable, but getting it into the PLA recycling stream is difficult. You can't just like drop it in a recycling bin and expect it to be recognized as PLA. Recycling programs, sort plastics by type, but they don't do it by recognizing the material. They do it by recognizing the objects. So like milk jugs, they say, oh, that's PLA milk jug. I know what that is. And they put that in the PLA pile. But 3D printed things that they don't recognize, like say one of these, they have no idea what kind of plastic this is. And so they're not going to put it in any specific bin for a specific type of plastic recycling. It's going to end up in landfill. So it's not quite correct to just say, oh, it's made out of renewable recycled material, so it can be recycled. PLA is also technically biodegradable and compostable, but it requires oxygen to biodegrade, and it requires higher temperatures when you compost it than most household composting generally provides. So if you try to compost it yourself, you'll probably find that you're not actually reaching the temperatures needed to really actually make this thing break down. And if instead you try to hand it to some sort of industrial or commercial composter, chances are they're going to say, why are you giving me plastic? You're just plastic can't compost. You're just, contaminating my load. And you'll have to have a really long discussion with them about, no, this is PLA plastic and it does compost and it's just not going to work. It's a problem. It's difficult to get this stuff to compost. And so while technically PLA is renewable and is compostable and is biodegradable and is recyclable, the realities of actually getting into those things done with this mask, it doesn't really happen currently. And that's a broader issue with 3D printing that eventually maybe will get sorted, but right now it doesn't work. And since they pointed out as a good thing, I just need to take down it's not reality, not right now. So, all right, so if this thing, the 1.0 mask, is a total waste of space and is dangerous, can I actually do some redesign work to get it to work and be useful? I had some specific ideas on the kinds of things that I might do to get it functional. But I really wanted to put together, just sort of a list of constraints and figure out if it really made sense to do it. And so here's my goals of redesign that are sort of used to get where I got. So first, it needs to be able to attain a reliable seal that gets most of the air in and out of the actual filter and not out the sides of the mask. Because when you actually just put this thing on as is, the air doesn't really make its way mostly in and out of this. It makes its way mostly out here and there because, it goes to the place of least resistance and the seal is very weak. So we need to fix that. I wanted to target the general public, not medical professionals. By leveraging a reusable daily use mask, you can reduce the demand for medical grade masks, which by the general public. which helps medical professionals in the end because they're not competing with the general public for their medical grade masks and N95 masks. This one's really important. It needs to be better than a sewn or fabric sewn 100% pure cotton mask. Otherwise, there's no point to it. You see, it's trivially easy to get some old T-shirts, bleach them clean, and then get one of the various sewing patterns online for making a mask, and make a flexible, semi-elastic mask that you can just put on your face. And cotton is an effective filter material. Since it's so trivially simple to do that, this, if you're going to 3D print a thing, it needs to provide some sort of advantage over that mask. Otherwise, you should clearly just get out the needle and thread, no matter how bad you are at it. But I identified sort of two things that I felt like immediately, if we could just provably do them in the design, they would result in a mask that's probably almost certainly better than a sewn mask. All right. One is that a damp filter is less effective than a dry filter. A mask that keeps the filter material drier is almost certainly a better mask. Material masks, cotton masks, they're in direct contact with your mouth and the spray from your mouth, which is going to get them damp. And then they're also in direct contact with your skin, and you do actually perspirate quite a bit, and it wicks it up right into the mask. A design that keeps the filter material sort of away from your mouth and your direct spray, has some sort of grill in the way that actually protects it even more from that direct spray, and isn't actually on the skin, so it doesn't wick away the moisture from your skin, will be significantly drier than filter material that's just, right smack on your face, and so theoretically should sort of automatically be better if you can accomplish it. The second thing I identified is that cloth masks don't have a good seal. They have an okay seal. A mask that provides a better seal but uses the same cloth in its filter is almost certainly better than a mask just made out of that cloth. If you look at the routine that doctors go through when they double mask and double glove and put on sort of an environment suit and the whole and the goggles and seal it all up, the whole 9 yards when they really need to, you see that what they do is they put tape on their face first, then they put on the mask, then they tape the mask to the other tape, then they put on the hood, then they put on the other mask, and then they tape that mask to the hood. All that is because these masks, just like if you just put on one surgical mask, the seal is terrible. I mean, it's good, it's okay, but it's not good. They have a deformable metal piece in the nose to try to match the bridge, but it's really not good enough to completely, keep it from coming out this way, and it does leak this way. It leaks out of the sides and it leaks out of the bottom, even with the with elastic in place. They're not great, but the polypropylene material that they have there is sort of puts up a small enough resistance that a good amount of the breath goes through the mask, but it's not perfect. And all kinds of research material shows this to be true, that it's okay but not great as far as the seal goes. That's the cloth mask. If we can create a seal that's better than that, where almost everything goes through the filter, then we are sort of going to be better than a cotton mask that you might make, no matter how good you are with the elastic. It must be easily disinfected well. A mask that's made out of sort of hard materials like this can be sort of sprayed down with bleach and water mist and mixed and disinfected pretty easily. We need to be careful not to introduce materials in any kind of redesign that would not disinfect easily, that would be breeding grounds for bacteria and such. We should allow for a variety of filter materials. I do like the idea of the modular filter cylinder, and realistically, if we make it modular, then the mask can actually get better or better suited to what's going on, what you're dealing with, based on what you actually fill it with, which sort of separates the development of filters from the design of the mask in a way, which is actually quite useful and makes it more useful in the long run. It's something that is like a simple one-size-fits-all cloth mask can't necessarily do anyway. It should be buildable with readily available 3D printing supplies and other craft supplies that were already out there. And likely to continue to be available. If we require things that our supply lines, which are certainly sort of are stretched, can't provide us, then they're not going to get made, and we'll still be in a shortage. So what we need is something that can be built from materials that are already out there, that you already had, or that you can easily get, and that aren't in danger of sort of having shortages in this time, or else it's not really going to be all that useful in negating shortages of supplies. It should be crafted by someone, be able to be crafted by someone without a 3D printer, and easily attained with easily attained supplies and equipment. I make a distinction or a separation between sort of 3D printing the parts and then crafting the mask. Obviously, we're making a 3D printed mask, so you are going to need a 3D printer to print the mask. But after the parts are printed, I want to make sure that the crafting process can be done by people who don't know much about 3D printing, with materials and tools that they have or are easy to acquire. If we make it too hard, then these things won't be applicable to the general public. So those are the design constraints that I put on myself in the process of redesigning this. Now, I have two mask designs that I'm going to present in subsequent videos. Okay, I have the Mark II design and the Mark IV design. The Mark II is meant to be easy to make from easily attainable materials. It adheres to those last two design constraints pretty strictly. The Mark IV, after I'd sort of accomplished the Mark II, the Mark IV is harder to make, requires a more advanced 3D printer, and some more exotic filaments and materials. And by that specifically what I mean is it uses TPU, which is a flexible filament. TPU is harder to print with, both in skills wise in terms of the person doing the printing, and also just the printer itself often needs to have some upgraded components in order to actually be able to print the filament. And then also it's just, as far as filaments go, it's rare, it's rarer. You're less likely to have it. It's not particularly exotic material, but it's less likely to be in the hands of your average hobbyist. But the Mark IV design is, in my view, a much better design. It's the one I've been wearing out when I need to go sort of on my supply runs. It's the design that I was able to get adding the TPU, it seems to be worth it. And so I want to present both of them because I think they're both makeable in this environment. But obviously the threshold is much lower for the Mark II, so it's important that I maintain a feasible design that doesn't require TPU and all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, I hope you watched both videos, and I hope this helps someone in need somewhere. Thank you. All right, but you know what? There's actually just one more thing, and no, I'm not going to try to sell you some sort of VPN. This is actually related. While I was making these tutorial videos on how to build the Mark II and Mark IV designs of my mask, the Copper 3D guys released their NanoHack 2.0 design. And I just want to talk about it for a second. The top line thing to take away is this thing, as far as I'm concerned, is a bit of a disaster. But also, I think this company has really turned the corner. I have, in the past, done my very best to present the idea that maybe they were more incompetent and less malevolent in the way that they've been acting. But this 2.0 design and all the sort of text that they've put in here to explain it and sell you on their materials has really convinced me that these guys really are actually just trying to sell you their materials, and that they're not actually really serious about making a thing that's gonna help people in a real sense. Just a really quick rundown here. The new design is solid. There's no more thermoforming at all, so it's not customizable to individual faces at all. They removed all references to thermoforming, even though that was in their original patent, and it's not in this thing at all. Technically, I think you probably could thermoform the new design if you wanted to, but they don't recommend it. Their filter material that they recommend now is this other copper-based filter material that some other company made, which seems to just be them playing into their idea that copper is a magical material, as opposed to actually just making good recommendations like polypropylene would be great if you had it. Instead, they want you to use 3-ply of a very specific copper-based polypropylene It's sort of nuts. And it also, by the way, rails against the research. Most research shows that 1 layer of polypropylene is appropriate and that 2 layers doesn't actually improve anything. So 3 definitely wouldn't. They reference scientific materials, but the scientific materials don't actually really have much to do with their designs or their materials. They tell you that you should seal the surface, which is completely and utterly ridiculous, because they're also in the middle of telling you that you absolutely must use their PL active material. Well, if their PL active material is an antimicrobial material with nanoparticles of copper in it, if you seal it up behind some sort of other layer, then it's not going to come into contact with anything and kill anything, which sort of, again, points to just their insanity. They're like, you must use our material, but we're also going to tell you to do something that completely makes our material useless. The way this thing is designed, it can't print without support, and this rim here that they say you should definitely use their custom TPU material on doesn't look like it can print without support at all. In fact, I'm not sure it could actually print even if you supported it. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Here they're referencing materials on the non-woven polypropylene that they didn't make, that this other company made, and pretending that that has something to do with their mask, which it doesn't. This is a completely different material, and this research that they're citing has to do with a completely different thing than their mask. And yeah, that's about it to start taking it apart. But I just want to say, look, I'm going to do probably another more substantial write-up on this design. But if you feel like this 2.0 design is where you want to go, I would strongly advise against it at this point. I don't think it can work. I think it's probably worse than like but the fixed versions of the 1.0 are probably a much better place to go. Anyhow, that's my opinion, and it's just my opinion. Once again, thanks, and hope you enjoy the other videos because I still think they're relevant.